Welcome, everyone, back to the Regional Initiative for Cybersecurity Education and Training, or RISA for short. I am excited to turn the stage over to the next moderator, Ms. Bridgett Paradise, Chief People Officer for Tenable, and the NICE Community Coordinating Council Co-Chair for Industry. She has spent the last 5 years at Tenable with her experience from CHRO in the fintech world and the education space, plus 20 years at Microsoft. If I can pass the stage to you, Bridgett.
Thanks, Paula. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm super excited to be here as a moderator today. And we're going to continue talking about the very large gap between the need for talent within the cybersecurity industry and the available people to fill those roles. The problem statement is obviously well documented, but it's not yet well solved, and it's not going to be fixed in a singular way or a linear way. So we have lots of conversations to be had. Today, we want to discuss multiple ideas on how we can help close the gap through making more pathways available specifically for entry-level positions and opportunities that provide avenues for growth and career advancement from the perspective of leaders in the cybersecurity space. With me today are three industry peers who are here with great thoughts and ideas to share on some possible strategies to consider. So let me introduce my fellow panelists. First, I have Jay Garcia. Jay leads Alteryx Spark Ed education program for the Americas West and LATAM regions. He's got over 20 years of leadership experience in education and community outreach, leadership, diversity and inclusion, and personal and corporate branding. Jay is a LinkedIn top voice and a George W. Bush Institute scholar. Prior to Alteryx, Jay led Fortinet's Global Veterans Program as a Marine veteran himself, along with their Network Security Academy program and education outreach and community engagement program. He's also held various leadership roles at the Department of Defense. So welcome, Jay. Next, we have Jason. Jason's the Executive Director of Global Talent at JPMorgan Chase & Company. Jason was previously the Director of Cloud Security at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, helping deliver intelligence to the U.S. community and Department of Defense. Jason's also a military veteran, having served in the U.S. Air Force. He's a member of the National Advisory Council of Empower, a nonprofit organization that seeks to create pathways to economic prosperity by launching digital careers for military veterans and young adults. And then lastly, we have Chelsea Smethurst, is a senior lead for space and connectivity security policy and global cybersecurity policy at Microsoft. Chelsea leads Microsoft's public policy related to adoption for cloud security, critical infrastructure, protection, and commercial space systems. She represents Microsoft on the President's National Security Telecommunications Advisory Committee, the Cyber Readiness Institute, and several CISA public-private partnership forums. Prior to Microsoft, Chelsea worked for PwC and Deloitte, delivering cloud security strategy and program solutions. She's also worked for the U.S. Department at Florida Attorney General's Office. So you can see we have an esteemed a group of panelists here that we're excited to engage in conversation with. And I'm just going to kick it off right into conversations. And Chelsea, I think I'm going to come to you first. So how is Microsoft addressing the high demand for cybersecurity talent? And what programs or policies have been implemented that have enabled some success or have moved the needle in any way?
Yeah, so let me start off by saying, thank you so much for the introduction, Bridgett. Wonderful to be here and speak to everybody in the audience today. Like any good cybersecurity professional who's been in this career field for over a decade, I have to bring a little bit of bad news to the conversation. So when we talk about the cybersecurity talent gap, right, we're talking about a global problem. We're looking at, by the year 2025, over 3.5 million cybersecurity jobs will be open globally. And I want to say, just putting that number into perspective, it's an increase of over 350% over the last 8 years that we've really been tracking that. So really shocking numbers, right? But also lots of opportunity. And so for Microsoft, right, we really see this as something that requires both a national campaign, but also a global campaign. So last year in the United States, we ended up partnering with community colleges to really try to address this cybersecurity talent gap in the US. So a little bit of perspective, for every 2 jobs in cybersecurity that's open today, a third goes unfilled. And so, that number concretely, it results in something like 700,000 cyber jobs are open in the US alone, right? And that's just a snapshot of one country, right? And what we're talking about for the cyber workforce. So this year, we had a really big announcement where we were expanding our cybersecurity skills campaign to an additional 23 countries. Some of these include Brazil, Canada, Colombia, Mexico, a number of others across the globe, but just, given the audience, I thought I would call out some of those awesome opportunities that exist. We kind of see this as a holistic issue, right? So one of the things that we're thematically really committed to is realizing that, there are traditionally excluded populations that have opportunities to enter the cyber workforce, right? Including women like myself. Only 17% of the current cybersecurity workforce is female. And so, this isn't just like an equality, issue, right? This is actually a big business case. When you have a more gender diverse workforce, whether we're talking about a private entity, whether we're talking about a public sector entity, you perform better, right? On whatever your mission is, whatever your strategy is, whatever your bottom line is. So concretely, Microsoft is looking to address this sort of national campaign and this global campaign in sort of 3 concrete ways. I think the first is you can't fix what you don't understand is broken, right? So one of the first phases of this global cyber campaign we've done is partnered with the OECD, so the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, to launch a really sort of global detailed study to say, hey, what are the issues here? Why can't we get talent to fill these 3.5 million, positions? And then the second thing we're really looking at doing is sort of as a part of this expansion, we're offering free training through our cybersecurity pathways through LinkedIn Learning. We have like a couple of courses there, like understanding the cybersecurity threat landscape and cybersecurity foundation sort of 101. And again, these are free training opportunities through LinkedIn Learning. And then the third thing I'll just say concretely is, you can't teach without cyber ready educators, right? And so, one of the things we're doing is scaling our Microsoft Learn for Educators program and providing all higher education institutions around the globe with access to free curriculum, sort of educator training and tools for teaching, including coursework like Microsoft Security and Compliance, just to give some specific examples. So that's a little bit about how we're trying to tackle the 3.5 million, opportunity, right, rather than a gap.
That's awesome. Those are great programs and policies. Jay, any policies or programs or practices at Alteryx?
No, absolutely, Bridget. And, that's a great question. And, again, thank you for the opportunity to speak here. We all know that, with the threat landscape becoming more complex and the adversaries, really expanding, their interest on doing harm to the economy, we all have to collaborate. And I think this is something that organizations are doing more and more, is collaborating with, institutions, whether it's higher ed, whether it's nonprofit organizations. At Alteryx, we have our education outreach program to be able to provide learning and resources to higher ed. In previous organizations where I was at Fortinet, we had our Security Academy program where we were partnering with colleges, nonprofit organizations, and industry partners. And I think this is something that, everybody's doing. Everybody wants to tackle this challenge because it's costing us in the tunes of trillions of dollars every year. And, what can be done about it? And I think it takes collaboration. It takes a concerted effort. And again, it's partnering with higher ed, partnering with nonprofit organizations, with government to be able to combat this. And I think this is something that we're seeing more and more as the threat landscape continues to expand. And, Chelsea, hits the nail on the head, right? Right now, we have a lot of openings, which presents a great opportunity for this audience to connect with these organizations. If we take a look at the top 4 cybersecurity vendors in the space, which, everybody knows, right? There's Cisco, Checkpoint, Palo Alto, Fortinet, all these organizations that focus specifically in network security, they have programs to help you upskill for free, right? So I think this is something that we definitely need to know about and take advantage of to be able to find employment opportunities in the cyber tech space.
Awesome. That's great, Jay. Jason, I didn't know if you had anything you wanted to add from JPMorgan.
Yes, and thank you again for having us. JPMorgan, we were following suit with what many of the panelists have talked about of hitting higher ed, but we've also started taking it to the high school and the middle school and starting to get them involved earlier into the program. So we have a cyber kids program where we help out and start putting some of our cyber experts and talking and mentoring kids that are in high school so they can start seeing the career path and how to get through before they're in their college days and being able to make a career decision. So we've been doing a lot of partnering, and that means as well as with historically Black colleges and being able to start bringing in some diverse candidates into the pool, because that's the best way for us to start solving this problem, to start bringing people in with different thoughts and be able to start sharing more knowledge and be able to start filling some of these gaps.
That's great. These are all great examples. How about once the talent gets on board, are there any examples of how we could further invest or plan on developing some of those talent in-house? Chelsea, I go back to you at Microsoft. Are there any programs in place to help build internally once people get hired?
Yeah, so funny enough, actually, a lot of the external programs that I just mentioned, which are free for really anybody that's on this call or educators, we actually leverage internally too within Microsoft. So I think there's two, and then maybe I'll dovetail with just a third sort of way we do this in sort of a different format that's not as formal. So Microsoft Learn is really the big one. So what this is it's really an online learning platform. Again, it's free. That really does a couple things, right? It combines sort of step-by-step trainings, browser-based interactive coding opportunities, sort of scripting environments. We're talking really technical training here, and also sort of task-based achievements. So a little bit more at that project program manager level that we're talking about, that really helps kind of anybody, both within Microsoft and externally, advance their technical skills and prepare for certifications. So, breaking this down, there's a couple of components inside of Microsoft Learn that we use as employees, but also as anyone on the call or interested in joining, right? We kind of define this in terms of what we call career paths. And this is something that has advanced when we talk about workforce sort of initiatives beyond even cyber in the last maybe 10 years. And I think this is great because not everybody's career path follows the same path, right? And I'm sure all four of us on this panel have very different ways that we became cyber professionals and what it looks like in our day-to-day jobs. And so we kind of bucket that in terms of what we call learning paths. And we have about just over like 220 of those. And they're different modules sort of built around, do you want to be a developer? Do you want to be a pen tester? Do you want to be in policy like I am? And just so we're catering to that, there is no one size fits all. A couple of these are broken down in terms of modules. So we kind of treat those almost as like building blocks where, you get to sort of build something, you pass like a small little test at the end, you get to take a lab where you actually get to test what you just learned in the previous module. So very much compartmentalized learning based. We have a couple of different roles based on sort of 17 roles or so. Some of these are cyber, many of these are not. There are also other technical development roles. Ultimately, the goal is, hey, we want to get you trained and certified, right? And so I think a number of companies, even beyond Microsoft, offer this. And it's really good, valuable, free training to build those certification and get those badges right on your resume, if that's something you're interested in, passionate about. So it's worth the extra effort. Usually the tools are out there for free to do that. And then, the other thing, I think this is really cool and probably speaks to those on the call, but it's available in over 23 different languages, right? So like, this is not something that's just in English, right? So I think it's a great opportunity. The second thing that we do, right, is LinkedIn Learning. And I mentioned that sort of on the previous question you had, Bridgett, where I think there's over 15,000 or something courses taught by experts of all different fields. Many of those are cyber, but certainly not all 15,000. And that's just a good sort of public platform that we also use internally within Microsoft. And then finally, I think this is something that I certainly would love to see, anybody in this career field, but also encourage those looking to get into it, whether you're sort of a new student, whether you're looking to transition into the field. I was on a panel a couple of weeks ago and somebody said, hey, there's no sort of roadblocks, there's just invisible ramps. And I think that metaphor really resonated to me because you just need to look for the opportunity. It's probably there. Find that mentor, find that resource that will help you get onto that right exit. And one of those ways we do that is through Women in Cybersecurity, right? Where we partner with a nonprofit to really try to boost that 17% women in the workforce issue. So that's a little bit of the overview of how we do it in Microsoft too.
That's great. Awesome. So let's throw the net a little wider and kind of talk about widening the aperture for non-traditional candidates, specifically to early in career. Are there any best practices, Jason, Jay, either of you that have put into place that are yielding some non-traditional candidates in your experiences? Jason, I'll go to you first.
Sure. Yeah. So one of the things I've been involved with for about 5 years now is a nonprofit called Empower. And what Empower does is they provide free tech fundamentals as well as cybersecurity and cloud security types of training. It's a 12-week program where the students will end the program with a Security Plus degree. And then from there, they do a 12-week internship with a company. So we've got presence in 7 different states right now. And with our cybersecurity program, we have now expanded that because of COVID to be able to become virtual, or it's all virtualized training. So people can take that training and be able to, work where they, or, take the training and then work where they are. So they don't have to relocate to one of the 7 hubs that we have. So it's been able to get them into the internships and be able to see the talent that they have and the ability to grow, and they want to get out of the financial challenges that they've had in the past. So we've gotten a lot of really talented individuals that have been able to go through our program, get onboarded into a company, and then excel in that company and get promoted multiple times throughout the program.
And what were some of the roles, Jason, that they were doing before?
We've for cybersecurity, we've gotten a lot into the vulnerability management space, because that in many financial institutions, that's where the entry-level roles are for cybersecurity, is being able to deal with the onslaught of vulnerabilities within software, within code that's going on. So we're starting them out as an early vulnerability management specialist.
Great. So that's a good entry point. Good to hear. Jay, do you have any examples you could share?
No, absolutely. And, I do want to share for everybody here listening, that there's plenty of opportunities in the cybersecurity field. Anything from being very technical, a security engineer, a SOC analyst, as Jensen mentions, penetration testers, to be in sales, to be in marketing, to be in business development. So I mentioned those because oftentimes that could be a good entry point to get into the industry, perhaps pursuing a role other than technical. And while you're there, utilizing the resources that are available within the company to upskill yourself. And again, to get the mentorship, some coaching from those that are actually doing in the industry. I say this because I often, ask a student or, a veteran in previous programs that I led is, why do you want to be a SOC analyst? Why do you want to be a penetration tester? And what they bring up is because it's cool, because, it pays well. But I always tell them that they have to do something that they're going to enjoy doing, for a career or for a job, right? So, again, there's resources that can help you with that. One of those resources that are available, it's, cyberseek.org, an awesome website that it breaks down the different positions, what type of training, what type of certifications the learner can expect to obtain so they can be successful in that particular role. Another, great resource is, it comes from CompTIA. CompTIA offers, the different tracks, and it lets them know what type of certifications to obtain. And hear me out for a minute, right? There's certifications both on the vendor neutral as well as vendor specific certifications. When we take a look at CompTIA or ISC Square, we're looking at, vendor neutral certifications. When we take a look at the Microsofts, right, the Ciscos, the AWSs, the Palos, the Fortinets, we're looking at the vendor specific certifications. But you're not really going to know what type of certifications to obtain for a particular role unless you speak with somebody from that organization. This is where LinkedIn comes in place. For all you here, If you're looking for an employment opportunity, you can target somebody at JPMorgan Chase that's a SOC analyst that perhaps graduated from FIU or perhaps graduated from some military academy. You can really target your search to be able to connect with a mentor that can provide that information, that can provide those insights. So that is for you if you're looking as a job seeker. For the organizations you're present, there's plenty of talent out there. There's plenty of talent. You know, one way we can take a look at is partnering with nonprofit organizations, as Jason and Chelsea mentioned here. You know, fantastic organizations that are global reach is Women in Cybersecurity or Women in Tech, right? The other area where we can find talent is our military community. You know, every country, whether it's North America or LATAM or you know, EMEA or APJ, they all have a military. And I'm here to tell you, you know, that thousands of service members leave the military every year. Plenty of them with the skill set that's required to operate in this space. I'm talking, you know, the intangible traits. They're not going to curl into a fetal position when something goes wrong, right? They have worked with diverse teams. Oftentimes, they come from, you know, various backgrounds, and they're put in a place where they have to learn a particular skill set. You know, many of them, as in today's military, they're all very technical. You know, prime example in the United States, they stood up the Space Force. And you know, the focus again is being able to protect against the adversary, but plenty of open roles in cybersecurity. So if we focus on this population, military veterans, military spouses, as well as underrepresented communities, you know, there's plenty of nonprofit organizations that are out there, but also I'm going to, you know, bring it back on the education side, the community college system, right? Not just four-year institutions, but the community colleges. Many of the folks in community colleges come from various backgrounds, various industries that are looking to obtain the two-year degrees in cybersecurity or looking at obtaining certifications in the IT of cybersecurities. That's another great resource of a pool of individuals that we can bring into this space, especially when we look at, you know, over 3 million open roles and specifically focus in, you know, this is just in North America and LATAM, like 3 million open roles. Like, you know, this is a prime area where we can find that talent to fill our open headcounts.
And if I can follow on with Jay, as another military vet, there's a lot of extremely talented people, but we need to challenge the recruiters on making sure that they're building and they're writing the job positions that are not so specific that they're looking for someone that may not have the broad experience that someone in the military would have. You know, I see it many times where, you know, I want 10 years of cloud experience. I want a CISSP and all of these additional things that may not be mandatories, but all of the recruiters are putting them as mandatory fields, and it's excluding a large part of the population that can be able to take and fill these roles and be very successful in them.
That's awesome. And so are there other diversity, equity, and inclusion opportunities as well that any of the panelists want to offer up as well? We're kind of taking notes, and there's some requests to put some URLs in the chats as well. But any other, we've heard a focus on the military and women in tech. Any others that come to mind that have yielded some successful candidates for any of the panelists?
And again, you know, I'm going to again go back to the two main ones that I have worked in the past, WISIS and Women in Tech. But for the job seekers here, you know, every organization, they have their Women in Tech Employee Resource Group. You know, they have their affinity groups that they can lean on for support. They can also lean on to make introductions. And I say this because as a job seeker, you can connect with a nonprofit organization or you can connect with the actual vendor to upskill yourself, obtain the learning, the training, obtain the free certifications that some of them might offer. But at the end of the day, to connect with an opportunity, I hugely believe in the power of the network. You have to know somebody inside the organization that can vouch for you, especially when we come with little experience, for those roles that we're trying to fill. So again, connect with the women affinity groups in every organization, not just, focusing on the big tech companies, right? The big security vendors in the space, but there's plenty of resellers, managed security service providers that you can lean on to be able to get entry into this industry.
Yeah,
And I think so I'll let you go ahead, Chelsea.
Okay, thank you, Jason. So I'll just say, I think there's 3 ways to think about this, right? Do what you can do for yourself, right? Through training and development. To Jay's point, where do you need an advocate and where do you need that network expanding, right? And that's where, do the outreach, be strategic about it, be thoughtful about it. It doesn't hurt at the end of the day, but it could really help. And then I think 3, pay it forward. So, get plugged into those affinity groups, those resource groups, those nonprofits where you have a voice that you can speak about your own experience and really open it up for others, right? I think briefly about how I got into this career field, and I had one small, tiny snippet into what it looked like to be a woman in IT, let alone cyber. I was in the 6th grade, so about 12 years old. There was it happened to be a workshop, and I don't even remember how I found out about it, but it was scholarship-based, didn't have to pay. They even paid for my commute to get to this program about 25 minutes away from where I lived. That was the only time I really had, right? And I think, well, I could have just missed that opportunity and never would have envisioned myself in this role. So just always keep grounded in those perspectives, because you can pay it forward and help those around you and those coming up in the career field too. So we can ultimately really, make a more equitable workforce and bridge those gaps. So Jason, over to you.
Yeah, no, I was going to go with the pay it forward approach also is, there are many talented cybersecurity professionals that are not mentoring people, especially outside of the career field, to, whether it's high school students, college students, giving that advice and guidance and showing them the path that you've taken. Doesn't mean they need to follow that path, but at least shows them there is a path and it doesn't matter. But I think with the 3 million open cyber positions, there's probably 3 million cyber professionals that could probably do some outreach and be able to help grow the career field.
Yeah, and cyber hygiene in of itself can start as early as kindergarten, right? I mean, if you think about the young kids these days, it's all connected in the Internet of Things. So, okay, let me just see if there's any questions in the panel here. Jason, I think there's a comment here about good point regarding the job requirements. A lot of the entry-level jobs in cybersecurity are asking for 10 plus years in CSSSP, which is absolutely the case. And I do think there's an opportunity as we do widen the net here to make sure that the job descriptions are recruiting in instead of screening out more. It's a bit of a philosophical change, but I think could make a big difference, not only just in non-traditional candidates, but in underrepresented groups as well. Any other questions here? I don't think we have any other questions coming in. Paolo, do you see anything that I'm missing?
One just came in.
Oh, one just came in.
While we're reviewing that question, something that I do want to share is if you go to the NIST, the NICE framework, the website, under resources, you can find a plethora of learning resources of various programs that you can utilize to upskill yourself, from whether it's somebody from a vendor or just from, one of the, nonprofit organizations that help you obtain those certifications. That's located on the NIST website.
That's awesome. Okay, one of the questions here is, I'm always hearing such a huge gap in demand for cybersecurity, but can we address the few opportunities within countries that are not as security aware? Not learning resources, more career opportunities. I am not sure.
And I think that, so at least how I'm taking that, JPMorgan, we've got over 3,000 cybersecurity professionals. there are many companies that we work with that we, within our financial arms that have 5 people doing their cybersecurity, and they're, managing millions and if not billions of dollars. And so there's a lot of these companies that aren't aware of the threat and the potential impact to that. And that's definitely something that we need to address is, just because you're a law firm doesn't mean that you should have one IT person who's also your cybersecurity person, who's also all these other roles. We've got to be able to help those smaller companies that are not really IT focused or not technology driven to be able to help, because they're just as at risk, if not more at risk, than large financial firms with 3,000 technologists that are there protecting our money every day.
Yeah, and I'll also add, so I do a lot of work in my current role for cyber capacity building. And, I think there's 2 ways to think about this. One, for those in the career field already, get good at communicating risk in a way that resonates with whoever you're talking to. Because, we tend to have this habit in cyber, and I'm guilty of it too, where we'll talk about, wow, you're at risk of a data breach, but translate that to impact, right? Where that might mean that you might be a small or medium-sized company, and data breach might mean that you're on the hook for sort of regulatory responses that will actually hit your bottom line at the end of the day and sort of cut into profit. This could look differently if you're in the healthcare, right? Where we're actually talking about lives and health being impacted through ransomware attacks, right, on hospital systems. And so I think there's a real need for those in the profession, but I think as you are interested in transitioning into it or growing into the position, to communicate risks in terms of impact to your audience and to your stakeholders in a way that's a lot more thoughtful than just sort of numbers or quantifying. And I think this will go a long way in really, I want to say, like, illuminating the risks that really exist when we talk about gaps in the cybersecurity profession. And that's sort of agnostic of whether we're talking about a large sort of nation that has a very robust cyber infrastructure already, right, or workforce, versus some that are just starting to, going down this path and journey, right? Be an effective cyber communicator, I think, is a really valuable skill to learn, whether you're in the field or you're going into it, about that risk and impact. So I think it's a really excellent question, and I'd also be happy to share some resources that a little bit old, I think, at this point, but very still on point in terms of how we think about capacity building, and might be helpful too to communicate those risks.
So Alexandra, I noticed that you provided a follow-up, and you asked about how to bridge the gap to people with little or no demand in country for overseas jobs. And last month I went to our Buenos Aires office and saw that firsthand. We stood up a Buenos Aires office and started with a lot of entry-level assistance and more of an operations focus. And talking to the teams, I was just so impressed on the talent and the knowledge, and they just didn't have the opportunities to grow in their career. They were just pigeonholed into these things. I don't know how to fix that, but now I'm at least have insight in, okay, we can start bridging this and we can start providing more of a developer focus. But it took me going out to another country to be able to start seeing that. So it's definitely a gap that we have and a blind spot that we need to start paying attention to, and figuring out how we can bring in people that may not be from traditional markets.
Great. Thanks, you all. Okay, so one kind of final question to each of our panelists to close out, and I think the previous panel did the same. So one key takeaway or idea that you can share with the folks in the Americas or the Caribbean to take back to kind of address this issue, fix the issue in organizations. What would that be? One big idea, no pressure.
I think it's the same with cybersecurity. There's no one idea that's going to solve it. There's no silver bullet that's going to protect your company or your firm from a cyber threat or a cyber actor. It's going to take a bunch of little decisions to make, being able to say, all right, I'm going to take a chance on someone. I'm going to open it up to a different market that we may not have a presence, but we know since COVID that we can do things virtually, and let's take a chance. So I don't think there's a one answer, but I think we've got to start making an effort.
I The great points, Jason. And I think for me, and I mentioned it earlier, it's going to take collaboration. I mean, that's plain and simple, right? Creating, whether it's initiatives or, some type of consortium, right? Like if you want to fix something, we can't do it alone. And in this case, I mean, we really have to rely on, higher ed. We have to rely on NGOs. We have to rely on industry to come together and create programs. And I've seen it done plenty of times in the tech space, whether it's cybersecurity or, software or data analytics. This is the only way that they create talent for the industry is by partnering and actually not just providing the training, but also hiring from it. Hiring from that talent pipeline that is being created. And at the same time, not just hiring for entry-level roles, but there's also opportunities to bring somebody, maybe at a, mid to senior level, not just entry level, because everybody's experiences vary. And, I come back with, it's going to take collaboration and concerted effort amongst everybody to be able to fix the issue.
And I'll just close out that impact is impactful, right? It doesn't matter if we're talking one person. You've changed one person's career trajectory. You partner with one sort of teacher at one university that's about 15 minutes from your office, or we're talking about 1 million, right? I think it's important to realize that you have a unique role and opportunity to partner with others, whether that's 1 or 10 or 100 or more. And take it and build that coalition of the willing to sort of drive awareness, whether that's, hey, I'm in a public sector role at a small agency and I'm focusing on transportation. That's important, right? Like you need to remember the value that you bring to your role. And then maybe there's partnerships there with local universities, with high schoolers, where you can just do like one day a year where you say, hey, let me tell you about what I do in my role. Right, be there, be present, and I think it will go a long way. Maybe it won't be immediate impact, but it'll eventually sort of manifest, right? To my own sort of story where we had the one teacher in the one program for women in IT, and here I am, right, 20 years later, and I think it's just important to remember impact looks different, but it's all very important.
Yeah, and I'll add a couple of thoughts too, because cyber is everywhere. It is the opportunity is not specific to just technical roles, and I think the intimidation of that eliminates a lot of people. I think they're too afraid to step forward because they may not have all the math skills, or they may not have the hardcore coding or computer science experience. But there are all kinds of roles. I consider myself a cyber person in human resources. There's a comment that came in about how important are cybersecurity lawyers, and the answer is critical. The privacy attorneys that work in most firms are in some of the most exciting roles that we have, and what they bring into those spaces is unique, and it's important, and it's powerful. So my advice, my one takeaway would be, when you think of cybersecurity, open the aperture, make sure you're thinking broadly. And I think all of our panelists said it in one way or the other, right? If you're not a mentor, go be a mentor, or be a mentee, right? Like, make the investment. Cyber's here to stay. It was, in my generation, it was coming into computer science and the IT space. Cyber is the way of our future, and I think a lot will depend on our ability to close this gap. So I want to, Paola, if you think it's okay, I think we're going to close this down. I want to thank our esteemed panelists here for their great insights and suggestions. It's amazing to have these industry leaders on this call talking about this important issue. So I want to personally thank all of you all for participating. And with that, Paola, I think I'll turn this back to you.
Thank you, Bridgett. And again, thank you, Chelsea, Jason, and Jay, for your remarks. It's been an incredible panel. It has been an extremely substantive day of presentation discussions, whether it was building the bridges, diversifying pathways, and connecting with early career, which is so important. And I can say this from a personal perspective, since I'm very early in my career. But the conversation doesn't have to end here. Feel free to connect with all of us at FIU, OAS, NICE, and the many other different organizations that you heard from today, and expand the reach and resources that we can share to strengthen the hemisphere. If you have enjoyed today's event, we also highly encourage you to join us at the 2023 NICE Conference and Expo, June 5th through the 7th in Seattle, Washington, where we can continue this conversation and see what else has come about in the months to come. Next slide, please. And more importantly, we want to hear from you. If there are any topics you want to present at next year's conference, you can do that as well by submitting a proposal on our website. We want to really expand these conversations throughout the hemisphere and hear what you guys are doing. Maybe we can learn from you and you learn from us, and we can really solve this issue. And we look forward, next slide, I'm sorry. We look forward to hosting this conference again next year, but I encourage you to visit niceconference.org for upcoming information on similar events. As I mentioned earlier today, we will also be uploading today's sessions to our YouTube channel that will be found on the NICE Conference website, and we will send it through email to all those that registered today. And again, I want to thank you all, and we look forward to Reset next year, and I hope you have enjoyed the conference just as much as we have. And with that, today's session has ended. Thank you, everyone. Merci, gracias, obrigado.